Le Nissan Kick-Play 2025 a beaucoup de plus. Apple CarPlay intégré pour jouer vos tunes préférées, des fonctions avancées de sécurité, un rendement énergétique remarquable, puis même la petite odeur de char neuf qu'on aime tant. Tout ça en plus pour moins. Le Nissan Kick Play 2025 est le véhicule neuf le plus abordable au Québec. Achetez-le à partir de seulement 22 774 $, incluant un rabais à l'achat comptant de 2 600 $. Profitez de cette offre avantageuse chez votre concessionnaire dès maintenant. Jusqu'au 2 mars, des conditions s'appliquent. Détails chez Nissan.
The RCMP could be watching you. The Privacy Commissioner is calling for stronger rules and laws to regulate the use of spyware in RCMP investigations. They use something called Pegasus and other technologies for surveillance. The police can actually monitor messages and turn on cameras and microphones and cell phones and laptops using state-of-the-art technology. And this is certainly the subject of a House of Commons Ethics and Privacy Commission. Should we be worried? What could this mean for the future of our privacy? And how often is this spyware used? Eric Perron is a cybersecurity expert who joins me now. Good morning, Eric.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for doing this. What exactly is Pegasus, and how does it work, or things like it?
Pegasus was a code name or a product name from a product that was developed by an Israeli company. So it's really the technology behind it that's of interest. You know, the name will change. So Pegasus was something that was used up to a few years ago.
Okay.
But I'm sure there's something new that's still being used today.
But the type of technology is I'm reading here ODIT spyware, ODIT.
Right.
What is that?
Well, there's different types of spyware, but this is the type of spyware where you want to be able to install it without the user having to intervene. So this way, it's obviously easier to get your victim connected to your spyware. So some spyware you will require the user intervention. You know, they'll have a pop-up, they'll have to click on something. But in this case here, when Pegasus came out, there was actually a vulnerability on iOS and Android where you could send somebody a text message, and the text message wouldn't actually display. And it would execute whatever the content that was included in the text message, which means that the spyware could basically be installed on anyone without any sign of it being received on the victim side.
Okay. Now, of course, I mean, when you say it like that, then it makes sense to me that the House of Commons wants to look into this, because it does seem like an untoward invasion of privacy.
Right, but there is a little context there, right? There's 38 million people in Canada. This was used apparently officially on 30 different people. So there's definitely some very unique cases that this was used on. And in the case of the RCMP or any type of entity that does electronic eavesdropping, they have to get a mandate, right? So a judge has to sign off on it. So from that point forward, how they collect the digital information sort of becomes a second priority in a sense. It's not that important how they do it, right? They do have a judge that signs off and says, we will allow you to monitor electronically, anything that you can that this person is doing. So from a privacy point of view, of course, it's always interesting to talk about these things so that we are aware of them and we understand, what kind of checks and balances are being put in place so that it doesn't become something that's used across just anybody and that just anybody can mandate somebody to do. So in this case here, it was only used around 30 people, on 38 million people of population. So it doesn't seem abusive at this point.
Okay, so it is kind of like having to get a search warrant to get into someone's house to search their premises. You can't just sort of walk in and say, we're going to monitor your phone and your laptop.
Right, exactly. And that's what we want as a security expert. That's what you want always to have some form of checks and balance where there's a well-defined process of who can authorize the use of this level of aggressivity, if you will. Because it's an aggressive type of, it's very intrusive, right? It's not, it's like having somebody move into your house, because we understand that what you have on your phone can be pretty personal. And so you need to have a process that's well-defined, so that just not anybody can do it. And it doesn't become something that could be used for political gain, for example, and for all sorts of other things. In this case here, it usually has to do with terrorism or something that's extremely important. And that sort of makes sense, right? You wouldn't want the RCMP or any intelligence agency to not do this kind of thing when the need is there.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to say, is that you do want them to be able to use this kind of technology to protect the public, exactly in the cases as you say. But at the same time, it kind of does, the fact that this stuff is possible makes you think, like what was Watergate? Watergate was nothing compared to what is indeed possible. But at the same time, people did go to jail for Watergate.
Right, exactly. So it's always the abuse, right? If you do it in a very well defined, very controlled fashion, then it should be fine. But in any type of scenario like this, there can always be abuse, and that's what somebody has to always constantly be looking over their shoulder to make sure that they limit the possibility of abuse. I'm
speaking with cybersecurity expert Eric Parent about this technology that the RCMP uses in the course of investigations. So what you're saying, you're reassuring us, the average consumer doesn't need to worry about this, or are there things that we should be putting on our devices to make sure the RCMP doesn't get in?
Well, I don't think we should be worried about it because, honest to God, even myself that works in this field, I'm not interesting enough for somebody to want to really listen to my stuff. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. Obviously, if you're in the type of business that does have something to hide, then the approach to risk management is going to be a little bit different.
Well, that's it, and I think that's a very important point. That the businesses have a lot of priority stuff that they don't want out there, and they do have to protect against industrial espionage and things like that. But they do have things that can, on their end, that's completely different. They do have technologies that can prevent that sort of thing. But the average consumer, like you say, we're not very interesting. I don't know why the RCMP would spy on me.
Well, also, when they deploy this kind of technology, there's a way to detect it, right? The fact that you have this kind of spyware on your phone, it is possible that it is detected. So it's one of those things. It's like when they broke the Enigma encryption during World War II. They had to be very cautious about how they use the information because once the enemy knows that you're reading their emails, they're going to stop using their emails, for example.
Yeah.
So this is sort of that scenario where they have to be very cautious on how they use it because at one point people are going to know. So therefore they've burnt that potential for information. Nobody's going to be using their phone, for example. So once again, the fact that they've used it on 30 cases over 4 or 5 years, it sort of proves that they're using it in a very controlled fashion.
And those are, as you point out, the 32 cases that warranted investigation by a law enforcement unit.
Exactly, and when we look at the sort of the cases that we see, we even locally here in Three Rivers, we had a terrorist cell that was taken down by the RCMP. So 30 cases doesn't seem that far-fetched across the entire country.
Yeah. All right. Well, you've certainly set my mind at ease. Thank you so much, Eric. Good to talk to you.
You're very welcome. Have a good day.
You too. Eric Parent, a cybersecurity expert. Nothing to worry about, nothing to see here. I got this fantastic text in the course of the interview. Trudeau has to authorize the use of this spyware. Let's put the blame where it's supposed to be, not who was told to use it. Trudeau is a tyrant. Yes, thank you for that.